So this is what they call a Santa Fe blue sky, huh?
Yep.
It's deep, rich blue. It's really it's a stunning day to look at houses. Boy, you talk about grand opening statements. This looks like the opening statement to an old John Wayne Western. You know, you expect the cavalry to come up and John Wayne to tie up his horse. So what do you think of Santa Fe style?
Kind of like it. It's quite interesting.
Yeah, it's growing on me too. And look at our portal. It looks like it's been here for 100 years.
Yeah, it sure does. It's looking great.
Funding for this old house is provided by
State Farm Insurance, keeping our promise of protection with auto, home, life and health insurance. Like a good neighbor, State Farm is there.
and by Parks Corporation, makers of safe and simple, environmentally responsible stains and finishes that enrich, protect, and preserve the natural beauty of wood.
Hi, I'm Steve Thomas. Welcome to this old house, and I mean old. We're here in the Frijoles Canyon ruins in the Bandelier National Monument, about an hour's drive west of Santa Fe. About 700 years ago, Anasazi Indians began to settle here. Drawn by the little stream in the valley below and the abundant game and vegetation, they built an extensive complex of cliff dwellings. As you can see, they too used vigas. Now down here on the canyon floor, archaeologists have discovered and stabilized the ruins of this 400-room pueblo. They calculate that 100 people might have lived here. Well, now that we're in the proper old house mood, maybe it's time to head on down the trail to Santa Fe and check in on our project. Well, meanwhile, back at this old house, things are looking a bit ratty. The window for the library hasn't arrived yet, so the opening's covered with plastic. The adobe walls are just lying there raw and unplastered. And meanwhile, out here, what was once a beautiful garden is now a repository for all the furniture that doesn't have a home. And even old Bill impatiently waits for his cherished place above the library doors. Hey, Norm.
Hi, Steve.
Things are looking a little disgusting around here, aren't they?
Well, you know, that's actually a sign of progress.
Yeah, it's hard for people to remember that, but, you know, projects go downhill and all of a sudden it turns the corner and they look great in just a matter of weeks.
That's right.
But what's the stock for?
Well, now that I have a good idea what the kitchen cabinet door design is, I think I'll mock up a couple and then have the homeowner and the architect look at them and see if they agree or disagree that it's what they want or don't want.
That's a good idea. That way it won't bite you later.
That's right. I have a lot of doors to make. I don't want to do them twice.
You bet. Hey, have you seen Wolf?
Yeah, when I was taking some measurements in the kitchen, there was some debris falling through. They're up there stripping the roof off.
Where there's debris, there's probably Wolf.
Yeah.
Well, I'll check in with you later, but okay. I'll go find Wolfie now. Hey, John Armejo. Hi, Bunker. How are you guys? Well, in here it'll take a little imagination too, but there's been a lot of progress. This shoring was originally installed to take the load off these vigas, because they're going to move this doorway over, and this is a bearing wall. There's about 8 inches of earth on the roof for insulation, and it bowed these vigas down like this. They stripped it off over the weekend because they're going to put a new roof on, and the vigas sprang back. Look at this skylight. Nicely cut in, nestled between these vigas. This is really going to flood the back part of this dining room with a lot of light. Real nice. And in here in the master bedroom, this fireplace that I helped Wayne build last week has got a fire in it. It's curing slowly. There's not a trace of a crack here, no smoke at all. And boy, it's amazing how much heat these things really put out. There was a problem with this viga here in the middle of the room. As they were stripping off the roof, they discovered that a slow leak had rotted off the whole tail end of this viga. So they replaced it. This is really going to be a nice room. Let's see what's happening here in the master bath. We've got some more shoring here as they're doing some work up top. This one's still nice and tight. Now, of course, this doorway will get filled in with adobes because it's the back wall of our dream kitchen. And boy, Look at this skylight. This thing must be 6 foot by 6 foot. Just floods the whole thing with light. It's a strategy that you see a lot here in Santa Fe. Everybody is very concerned to preserve the old look of the facade. So to get light in the interior of the building, they use these skylights. You see it all over, and it's really successful. And where's Wolf? Here's John Wolf, our general contractor.
Steve.
Hey, John. Boy, look at the mountains from up here.
It's a great view from here.
Oh, it's lovely. Well, you guys have been busy.
Oh, we had a tough weekend. We had 14 people up here, and we were taking off the old roofing system and all the soil and everything else. I left a patch for us to take a look at. A lot of the homes in this area still have this roofing system on it, and they're using it currently today.
Well, what is it exactly?
Well, what it is that there's a viga down below. We have a rough sawn deck that was covered with some building paper, 8 inches of soil to shape the roof and to also provide some insulation, capped off with tar for waterproofing. Many layers of built up, capped off with the gravel finally.
Kind of primitive, John. Is this what you're going to use again?
Oh no, it's 1990s. Let's go over and I'll show you what we're going to be doing. 5 years ago when I was doing the studio roof, I basically used the same system that they have been using here in town for many years.
How's that?
Well, instead of using the soil, I would use a man-made insulation.
Yeah.
And then I would cap it off with the 4-ply built-up tar and top it off with the gravel.
What was the problem with that?
It would always break down.
Yeah.
It never lasted. After about 3 years, we would have problems with it. But I have a new and better way of doing it that I'm going to be using on this house. And what it is that I'm going to be using foamed in place polyurethane. That's not only going to make the roof waterproof, but it's also going to insulate it and help shape the roof for drainage.
Foamed in place. You mean you spray it on or something?
That's correct.
Well, I look forward to seeing that. But meanwhile, Mr. Wolf, I better go check in with Mr. Abram down in the cabinet shop.
Oh, that cabinet shop. Those beautiful tools. Do you think Norm would mind if I were to borrow them for a
I
weekend?
don't know. He's kind of stingy. Hey, Norm.
Hey, Steve.
Guess who wants to borrow your tools this weekend?
Everybody, right? Well, you'll have to tell them that the man who loans tools is out.
He'll be disappointed to hear that. So how's the cabinet doors coming?
It's coming pretty well. Here's one of the frames, and I've already put it together. And what's important is how I did the corners. I started with some 5/4 stock,
Yeah.
rabbited it out for the field, and then made slots in each corner for these beechwood biscuits that will go in with a little bit of glue, and with one nail to hold it together, that'll hold that joint tight.
Boy, that's a great
forever.
system.
Now, the whole frame, once it's assembled, here you see it has a rabbet all the way around,
Yeah.
and it'll sit over the field. Now, I've made it up with 2 types of boards, plain smooth and rough, so they can make the selection as to what they want. Then each corner gets these 2.5-inch blocks, and then we're going to trim the whole thing out with some kind of molding. Now, this molding we're not really happy with yet, but it'll be something around this size, and it'll go around each block and the edges of the door. I think it looks pretty good.
Yeah. It's kind of rough, you know. I don't know how it would play in New England.
Yeah, it is different. I don't know how it would do either.
But down here, they love it. In fact, they call it Santa Fe style. And I had a chance to check out Santa Fe style the other day. Watch.
Steve, I brought you out here to see a great example of Pueblo Revival architecture.
Oh, yeah? What are some of the things that we should look for?
Well, one would be this buttress.
Yeah.
These walls are all double thick adobe, and the buttress helps support it because the adobe does not have much lateral strength. Up there's a canale, and it's actually carved out of a log, and it takes the water off the roof.
Sure.
I always tell people there's only 2 things that can hurt adobes: earthquakes and water. We don't have the earthquakes, but you got to get the water off the flat roofs.
You bet.
This is a big, thick lintel, and the reason it's so large is it's holding the weight of all those adobes above it. Around here's the front portal.
Oh, look at this. With all these setbacks and levels, you know, I'd think I was in the Taos Pueblo.
That's exactly right, and that's where Pueblo Revival comes from.
I see.
If you think this is great, why do you see the inside? Come on in.
Can't wait.
I want you to see one of my favorite rooms in Santa Fe.
Jeez. This is an incredible room.
Isn't it wonderful?
Look at the objects in here.
Yeah.
But, it almost feels more like a church than a small little Pueblo living room or something like that.
Well, I think you're probably right. The architecture was based on church proportions. It's twice as long as it is wide, a high ceiling.
But this is like the largest cow in Santa Fe or something like that.
You're probably right. But it's also sitting on a beautiful fireplace. And the fireplaces traditionally in the Pueblos were little kiva corner fireplaces. But in a room this big, you've got to have a central fireplace to heat it.
Yeah, I imagine you would.
It's got a great mantel and an arched opening. And over here is a nicho. And that was traditionally for religious objects.
That's San Jose in there?
Right, it's a little hand-carved santos. It's beautiful. There's shelves for some of the pottery, and there wasn't a lot of furniture, so bancos were built to sit on and be cozy and close to the fireplace.
You know, one of the things that I think gives this room such a wonderful feeling is the ceiling. And, you know, I was wondering what you could tell me about that.
Let's go up to the balcony and get a much better look. The thing to remember about this ceiling that's so amazing is it was done before there was really electricity or power tools like we have today. So all these beams were literally carved out of trees with hand-hewn axes.
And what are these designs that have been carved into the beams there?
We see that a lot in Santa Fe, and especially in the church beams, and those are called bullets. They're done with a chisel. And in between we've got spruce latillas. But let's look in this room, because there's some latillas I really want you to see.
Okay. Well, this is a very intimate space. I mean, it's very cozy and got a little kiva fireplace in the corner and a stunning view of the Sangre de Cristo Mountains.
This would be more a traditional Pueblo room, cozy as you say. What's not traditional are the big windows. Pueblo would have little tiny openings just to get in and out of, or to see if the enemy's coming. But when you've got a view like this, you got to open it up to nice big windows. But these are the latillas I told you about.
Yeah. Now what are these?
Well, we have a lot of cedar around Santa Fe, so the Indians would go out and split it, and when it's split open, you could lay it and use it as decking. And it's also wonderfully aesthetic. It has a great red color.
It does. You know, this is a very private space, and I'm curious about the other public spaces.
I've got a surprise in the dining room. Come on down and see it.
What continues to impress me about this house is the really elegant way they've furnished and decorated it. It is quite extraordinary.
It's true. It's very traditional southwestern style. But the classic simplicity of Santa Fe architecture really lends itself to all types of furniture, from contemporary to European.
Well, they've done it beautifully, and you know, this arch going into the dining room is also quite wonderful. These thick walls.
These are double thick adobe walls, almost 3 feet thick. You can really tell as you go through this arch.
You know, I imagine with all this masonry, it must keep this building very cool in the summer and also very warm in the winter.
It's true, but what I really brought you in here for is to see these frescoes.
Aren't these wonderful?
This is not a traditional thing that you see in a lot of homes, although we do have it in our oldest hotel. These paintings were done right on the wet plaster, and they show 19th century pastoral scenes in Santa Fe.
Wonderful. And look at this fireplace. Isn't that unusual to have the square opening?
Not really. The Pueblo Indians use this square opening quite a bit. What's also nice about this fireplace is the step-back mantel and the way the flue is on the squared off and on the angle.
I love this room. And I also, this door caught my eye too. It's beautifully carved, and where does it go?
Well, let's go in the kitchen. Every grand Santa Fe home needs a contemporary kitchen.
Okay. Boy, look at this. Plenty of light, wonderful space. I love the ceiling too. Look at this piece. This is all dished out from preparation of thousands of meals. The restaurant stove, it's almost a requirement in the kitchen these days. Chiles. And these cabinets, what kind of wood are these?
These are alders, Steve.
Really?
What's really special, this is the pewter hardware. Each one's a different Kachina doll.
Really? I love the look of these cabinets. I guess I'm a little surprised to see them in a Pueblo Revival home.
Well, they are territorial, and it's actually quite appropriate and reflects the history of Santa Fe.
Really?
Yeah. In the mid-19th century, the old Santa Fe Trail opened, bringing all kinds of new manufactured goods to Santa Fe and starting a new architectural style, territorial. And I have a great example of a territorial house in downtown Santa Fe. Do you have some time? I'll show it to you.
You bet. I'd love to see
Let's
it.
go.
Okay. So this is what they call a Santa Fe blue sky, huh?
Yes.
Well, it's the deepest blue I've ever seen, and it's a stunning day to look at houses.
This is a great example of a territorial house.
Territorial, huh? Well, already I can see differences. It's much more angular than the other house. Corners crisper, and there's the introduction of brick.
That's right. When brick was brought to Santa Fe, people began to use it as a coping detail on the parapets, and it really helped protect the adobes.
Just so that the water dripping on it didn't melt the adobes.
That's right.
Huh? You know, another difference that I noticed right away is wood around the windows and doors.
Well, it's not just any trim. It's a Greek Revival trim. Look at that pediment over the door.
The triangle there?
That's right.
I see.
When the government began to build out here and build their outposts, they brought architects trained in Greek Revival.
Uh-huh.
And when the homeowners saw these wonderful Greek Revival details, they would adapt them to their adobe homes. And this is how territorial style emerged.
I see.
Would you like to go inside and meet the owner?
Sure I would.
Great.
Ooh, what a wonderful place.
Pat and Michael have a real estate agency in town, and Michael is a writer.
Hello, Michael.
Michael, this is Steve Thomas.
Steve, how are you?
What a wonderful place you've got.
Thank you very much.
Tell us about it.
Well, this is a 3-room territorial style home that was built around 1929, and my wife and I purchased it about 8-10 years ago. Except for the kitchen, which you see is quite contemporary and Southwest feel, the house is pretty much as it was when it was built.
Well, let's see some of the old parts of the house.
Glad to show it to you.
Now, these strip oak floors, are they original?
The oak floors, as is much of the woodwork, is all part of the original house.
Even these windows over here?
Yes, definitely the windows with the wide reveals at the bottom and the typical territorial framing around the sides.
And what's this?
That we are not 100% sure what it is. We like to joke that it's a little bit of a confessional. As you can see, there's a door on each side, one in the living room and one in the bedroom.
Look at that.
But it's a detail that we're always been smitten with
wonderful.
and wouldn't be without.
No. And in here, oh, look at this, an old bathroom. This is from the 30s or 20s. This could be a bathroom in Boston or Los Angeles or Chicago, but this roof could not be anywhere but Santa Fe.
That's right. That's still the Pueblo detail that is maintained in many of the territorial homes, Steve.
Now, what about the walls? These are adobe again?
Well, the walls may look like adobe, but they're not. They're a block wall called the penitentiary block.
Penitentiary block?
And that was because they were blocks made by the inmates in the penitentiary about 50 years ago.
No kidding. So this isn't adobe after all.
Correct.
Now, then, again, you have the woodwork that we saw earlier.
The same details in the rest of the house.
Well, what's it like to live in a house like this?
Well, we were so in love with the house that when we lived in here for a year with our 2 children, we decided to buy the adjacent piece of land and build a house incorporating the same architectural details and the feel and tone of this house.
Oh.
And I'd love to show it to you.
Oh, we'd love to see it.
As you can see, Steve, the new house is about 60 feet from the old, and we tried to tie them together thematically. And the best way to do that was to have a very grand opening statement, hence
Boy.
the large portal.
Boy, you talk about grand opening statements. This looks like the opening statement to an old John Wayne Western. You know, you expect the cavalry to come up and John Wayne to tie up his horse.
It has that kind of feel.
Yeah.
You might say that it's a combination of refinement and rustic.
Uh-huh.
You have the
Sure.
pillars here, which are again classic Greek Revival, very fine millwork,
Yeah.
compared to the rustic vigas overhead.
Yeah.
And then when you look at the shutters again, that's some nice millwork here.
Sure.
With the traditional territorial casing around the windows.
Yeah. Yeah.
But you go to the floor and the brick is quite rustic. These come from an old building that was raised in northern New Mexico.
Yeah. Now, why brick here?
We wanted to unify the house every way we could, so we used brick. The same brick you see here is the same brick throughout the house.
Oh, can we take a look inside?
I'd love to show you.
Oh, look at this. You know, this gives you a tremendous feeling of grandeur. This hall that runs all the way through the building here.
One of the old territorial houses, this was called the zaguan, which means
Zaguan?
which
Yeah.
means central hallway. And the idea was that you'd have the hallway running the length of the house with the mirror image of the front doors and the back doors. Also in the old territorial houses, the zaguan would divide the house. On one side you'd have the public rooms, on the other side you'd have the private rooms or the bedrooms.
So this is the living room in here?
Yes, it is.
Oh, look at this. Now these details over here we've seen before, but expressed much differently.
Well, in a typical territorial house, you'd have a wooden sill. We have a more rustic and formal feel to the house, so we use flagstone. Also, notice the thickness of, of the splays here, the flared windows.
Is that what these are called, where it flares in?
And this is made possible by adobes. This is a double adobe.
Oh, so this is an adobe house.
There's about 20,000 adobes in this house.
Really?
And on the front side here, it's all double adobe to give it maximum mass and depth.
Now, this fireplace is different than those we've seen.
Well, again, we have the flagstone hearth. And the mantel, we tried to be a little bit inventive. We used 2 corbels from an old Spanish church and a nice antique mold piece from Mexico.
Very nice. Now, what is this transom above the...
Well, this is a detail that we first saw in the Friends Meeting House on Canyon Road. Basically, it's having a transom of an open space of the doorway, which allows you to show your pots or your artifacts. A very nice display area.
Very nice, very effective. And this is the dining room.
This we tried to give a nice old world feel to.
This is a wonderful room.
Again, the brick floors which go throughout the house. You have the exposed lintels, which is the same type of beam as the ones overhead.
Now, what is the rosy colored paint that I see everywhere?
Well, if you look real closely at the plaster, it is not painted at all.
I see.
Throughout the house, there is no paint except on the doors.
I see.
All the plaster is exposed. We call it a diamond finish plaster. And the idea of leaving unpainted is that when the light reflects off it, you get a very beautiful muted colors of roses and beiges, magentas even.
That is wonderful. Now, this archway here and the tile and everything reminds me of a small bakery I was in the town of Tashbish on the island of Malta.
Well, the back-to-back fireplaces give the arches so much depth.
Another thing about the arches is that in a territorial house, it's a very geometric, rigid form, and we try and soften that wherever we could. And by putting the arches here, again, it's a mirror image, it gives them some softness to the hard lines.
I think it's extremely effective. Now, these are, in fact, Maltese crosses, aren't they?
Yes, they are, and that, again, is another territorial detail that was common over a century ago.
And how does this kitchen work with the family?
It's a great room. The flow is terrific because from the kitchen, you can go into the family room.
Family room here. Now, you've changed the ceilings on us here.
Yes, we did. This room has its own identity, although it's quite similar to the rest of the house, and we have the same brick floors. The ceiling is a spruce latias, which are the small beams above the vigas, and the spruce we use because, again, of the red and gray colorations.
Now, what are these?
These are called salt cedar twigs, and we use these through several rooms of the house. Again, they tie with the grays and the reds. And let me show you, this is the real salt cedar right here. You get a good feel for it.
Oh yeah, look at that. Again, this wonderful red color that occurs throughout the house.
Yes, it does. Now, Steve, once again, we're back in the main hallway. Let me show you one detail here. The great thing about adobes, the depth and the mass, they allow you to recess good-sized bookshelves like these.
Oh, I see. It's just stuck right in the wall there.
And notice the bullets. They look familiar, Steve.
They are familiar. I remember those from this morning. Now, what's the story on these doors? They look very old, and they seem to have a patina of green paint on them.
They are old. They come from Mexico. Throughout the house, we have many antique pieces, a lot of them from Mexico.
Yeah, they're very successful here. Wonderful. Well, what's next?
Well, now that we've seen the public side of the house, let me show you the private side.
Okay.
This is the master bedroom. I want to point out one detail about these doors. Throughout the house, we have the same style door. It's called the linen fold pattern. It's a very simple territorial style with vertical lines coming through. Very simple and elegant.
Nice, nice. Onward. Well, the first thing that catches my eye in here is this fireplace. You know, this mantel looks like it could have come from any home on the North Shore of Boston, for instance.
Well, one of the intriguing details of the house is in the 7 fireplaces, all the treatments are different. This is probably the truest territorial detail, and that since territorial homes evolved from the federal houses back east, you might very well find a mantel like this back east.
Michael, tell Steve about this beautiful bed.
This bed was designed after a model that we saw in an old book based on a cabinet maker in Taos who at the turn of the century built his bride a bed very similar to this, except in those days they weren't king-size beds. They were double beds. So we had customized a bed just like that and made it into king size.
This is great. Well, Sharon, I want to thank you very much for bringing us here. Michael, thanks for having us into your home, and I hope that when our project is finished, you'll come up and see it.
We look forward to it.
Okay.
Thank you.
So what do you think of Santa Fe style?
I kind of like it. It's quite interesting.
Yeah, it's growing on me too. And look at our portal. It looks like it's been here for 100 years.
Yeah, it sure does. It's looking great. And actually, there's some techniques that they probably didn't use 100 years ago, though. I mean, they've got a threaded rod into the concrete with a nut and a washer just to temporarily hold this post up, because later the finish on the floor will come up about an inch below here. Then they'll seal it with some nice tight grout so the bottom of this column won't rot out.
I like the way it tapers into that corbel up top.
Yeah, look at that joint up there, Steve. It's scarfed, so it can't spread apart.
Kind of reminiscent of a New England barn, huh?
Sure is. Let's see what's going on over up on this corner.
Hey, John.
Hey, Steve.
John?
Norm. How you doing?
Good. Now, how did you tie all this together? How is the beam fastened to the corbel?
These are all lagged together. We've got a lag going right through.
And how about the corbel to the column?
Same thing. We've got another lag going through there.
That's not going to go anywhere. And I see on this rafter you've marked out a bird's beak, you call it?
Bird's beak,
Bird's
yes.
beak, bird's mouth, what we call it. And you're going to cut that out so that it locks over the beam. And how do you fasten that?
Same thing. We've got a lag going
The
through
bolts.
here
You guys really
as well.
secure everything.
Yeah.
Now, what about up on the other end? How do you secure that so the whole system doesn't kind of pull away?
We've got a 20 gauge angle bracket that's going to be, we ram set into the bond beam and then tie it into the rafter as
So
well.
it's just a piece of metal and you shoot it into the concrete and then you nail it to the, spike it to the wood so it can't pull away. That
Exactly.
should do the job. What are you going to have sitting on the rafter?
We've got a 1 by rough sawn decking on top of this.
Rough side shows underneath?
Yes.
Yeah?
Yes, it does.
And what's on top of that?
We've got our metal finish roof on top of that.
So sort of like a standing seam metal roofing surface?
Yes.
Well, that should do the job. Looks
Yeah.
great. Thanks, John.
Thanks, John.
What's up next time, Steve?
Well, next time we've got windows going in. Our radiant floor heating system's also being installed. And also the foam trucks are going to roll up and spray everything that's not moving. So
Okay.
until then, I'm Steve Thomas
And I'm Norm Abram.
for This Old House.
Funding for this old house is provided by
State Farm Insurance. Keeping our promise of protection with auto, home, life and health insurance. Like a good neighbor, State Farm is there.
and by Parks Corporation, makers of safe and simple, environmentally responsible stains and finishes that enrich, protect, and preserve the natural beauty of wood.
This is PBS.
The original companion volume to This Old House, written by Bob Vila with Jane Davison, is a comprehensive guide for homeowners who want practical advice on how to understand, plan, and manage a home rehabilitation project, using both professional help and their own time and effort. To order your copy of the softcover edition, call 1-800-441-3000. $19.95 plus shipping and handling. Credit cards accepted.